بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. My dear respected ulama, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And welcome to an introduction to Zakat workshop. I begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of the worlds, and sending peace and salutations on our beloved messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I would like to begin by thanking Maulana Musa Desai, my dear friend from Ilm Seekers Academy, for giving me the opportunity to present this workshop. And I want to also extend my thanks to all of you for attending. I hope and pray that we all learn something new today and that it will be beneficial. Now, before we begin, inshallah, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping rules. This presentation is going to have a lot of information on screen. So the larger the screen, the more information you'll be able to actually see. So what I would recommend is if you can open this link from your laptop or PC, or maybe even cast the link onto your television or monitor, inshallah, it'll be more beneficial for yourself because later on, there'll be lots of detail, lots of figures, lots of graphs and stuff like that on the actual screen. So it will just help you understand it. Next, please pay attention and listen with the intention of learning and acting upon what we learn today. The first hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, Rasulullah mentions, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ, that all actions depend on our intention. So our intention today is to learn about one of the obligations in Islam and one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which is Zakah. And everything that we learn, inshallah, we will put into practice. Every single second that you spend today listening to this workshop, learning about this workshop, learning about Zakah, inshallah, will be very, very rewarding and inshallah will be beneficial for yourselves from this day forward. Now, if you have any questions throughout the workshop, please note them down, and then at the end of the workshop, inshallah, I might open it up for questions. As you can appreciate, this is quite a long workshop, so I'm trying to condense it as quickly as I can. So I won't be taking any questions as I'm going through the actual workshop. At the end, when I open up the actual questions, if you can ask then, we'll try and answer them as we can. And if not, we can take them away and inshallah get back to you with the answers as well. Also, during the workshop, I'll be asking questions. Now, normally we print out a worksheet, but what I'm going to do for all of you is the chat facility is going to be open, inshallah. So when I do ask you for any questions, if you can write the answers in the chat, and we'll see if you've got them right or not. Please try and participate. The reason why we ask questions is so people, if they don't know the answer, they've identified a knowledge gap. If they do know the answer, alhamdulillah, it's very, very good. So my name today, for those who don't know me, is Ebrahim. And without further ado, I will inshallah go through today's schedule. Now, the course today has a total of 8 modules. So we're going to start talking about an introduction to zakat in Islam. What is zakat? Why is zakat so important? Why is so much emphasis paid on zakat in Islam? We're then going to talk about the hadith concerning zakat. What is the reward of discharging zakat properly? On the other hand, what is the warning for a person who doesn't discharge their zakat properly? Then we're going to talk about who must pay zakat and what it must be paid on. So this course is going to take literally 2 different parts. In the first part, we're going to learn the theory of how to calculate zakat. And in the second part, inshallah, we'll go on through some calculations. So the first thing we're going to learn is who must pay zakat and upon what assets, what items do we need to pay it upon. After this, inshallah, we're going to then look at further information which is required before we can actually calculate zakat. Is there any other information that we need? And then we're not going to have a break because we're going to go straight through. And then we're going to go into a practical exercise on how to calculate zakat. So make sure you stay online, inshallah, because I'll be giving you all exercises to do to make sure that you've learnt the theory and are able to actually put it into practice. We're then going to talk about how to discharge zakat. So once we've actually calculated our zakat, how do I discharge it? Who do I discharge it to, etc. So also, we're going to talk about charities because nowadays many of us, we use charities to discharge our zakah. So what conditions should the charities meet for us to be able to trust them with our zakah? We're going to talk about that. And then finally, inshallah, we're going to summarize everything that we've learned today in the workshop. So I'm going to quickly go through, inshallah, and we'll begin. So the aims and objectives of this course. Now, alhamdulillah, this workshop was prepared under the guidance of our dear teacher, Maulana Abdul Rahim Sahib Hafidhullah. He asked me a couple of years ago, I think it was just during COVID, to prepare a presentation on zakah, as it is an integral subject in Islam and a subject which needs to be communicated to all those who will discharge zakah. And one of the best ways to teach them would be through a workshop such as this, where both brothers and sisters can also attend. Now, what are the aims and objectives of today? Firstly, we're going to learn about the importance of zakah in Islam and the wisdom behind it. Then we will learn about the subject of zakah and how it relates to a person's finances. Now, as times change, the rules of zakah will not change. However, the application of zakah will evolve to meet the requirements of the time. For example, a few years ago, there was no pensions, no shares, no bonds, no bank accounts, etc. But now there are. So the question arises, how do we discharge zakah over our assets, which are in our banks, for example, etc. So it was very important that a course be developed which will address our current financial status. Also, zakah is only given once a year, so our knowledge on this subject needs to be refreshed to ensure we discharge it correctly. And then we're going to learn how to calculate our zakah. What do we have to pay it on? What don't we have to pay it on? When do we have to pay it? How often do we have to pay it? We'll also learn about the valid recipients of zakah. One of the conditions of zakah is that it must be given to a valid recipient, otherwise it will not be counted as being discharged. We will then go through some zakah scenarios and learn how to calculate zakah practically. So I'll go through a scenario, then I'll give everybody here on the workshop a test as well, so you can see if you know how to calculate it as well. Now, moving on to references. So what have I used to prepare today's workshop? One of the main texts I've used is the commentary on Jami' al-Tirmidhi by Mufti Sayyid Ahmad Palampuri rahmatullahi alayhi, called Tuhfatul al-Ma'i. Now, with regards to advice on contemporary rulings, I've used material prepared by Mufti Faraz Adam, including his booklet on pensions, also material by Mufti Abdurrahman Mangira, who has an excellent set of videos on YouTube on zakat as well, and also one of my classmates, Maulana Hilal Patel. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the efforts of all those who have helped in putting this workshop together. So let's start off by talking about an introduction to zakat in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the word zakah 32 times in the Quran. It has been mentioned with the word salah 28 times. And this shows us the importance of these actions in Islam. We know that the 5 times daily salah was made compulsory on the night of Mi'raj. But when was zakah actually made compulsory? We look at the early days of Islam. In Surah Al-Muzammil, which was the third surah to be revealed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة, and establish salah and pay zakah. So the ruling of zakah was revealed during the Meccan period when Rasulullah spent his first 13 years in Mecca. So during the Meccan period, the ruling of zakat was revealed, but no further elaboration was revealed on this command. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum even asked Rasulullah about this. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ قُولِ الْعَفْوَ. And they ask you, meaning the companions radiallahu anhum asked Rasulullah as to what should they spend. Say to them, the surplus. So the command was to spend from whatever was surplus, extra from their wealth. No fixed amount of wealth was specified. Rasulullah then migrated to Medina, and in the second year of Hijri, when the Islamic society was established with a rule of law, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then revealed the further details of zakat. Now, as we go through this workshop, inshallah, I'm going to be asking questions, so I want you to put the answers in the chat. So some of them are going to be quite simple, we're going to start off with. Some of them might get a bit more difficult. So if you could answer the first question, please, what are the 5 pillars of Islam, and put the answers in the chat. Let's see how people get on, inshallah. I'll give everybody a minute to put their answers in the chat. Okay. Is the chat facility working? Yeah, it's working. Iman, Salah, Zakah, Som, Hajj. Shahada, Salah, Zakah, Som, Hajj. Alhamdulillah. So we've got a couple of volunteers who've actually got the right answers. So inshallah, let's quickly move on. So let's look at how zakat is related to the pillars of Islam. So as well as the Quran, There are many ahadith which tell us about zakat. The Sihah Sitta, the 6 authentic books of ahadith, all have chapters on zakah. And you will see hadith in which zakah has been mentioned with the other foundational commandments like the following. So the 5 pillars of Islam have actually been taken from this hadith here, which we can see in Sahih al-Bukhari. So in Sahih al-Bukhari, in Kitab al-Iman, there is a hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بني الإسلام على خمس, that the foundation of Islam is on 5. شهادة الله إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله, that to bear witness there is no God but Allah and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is his messenger. وإقام الصلاة, to establish salah. وإيتاء الزكاة, to discharge zakah. والحج, to perform the pilgrimage. وصوم Ramadan, and the fasting of Ramadan. Also in the famous hadith of Jibreel, one of the questions that was asked by Jibreel alayhi salam when he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam just before the end of his life, he came in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and nobody recognized who he was. He was wearing really, really clean white clothes, and he came and sat right in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he asked him a number of questions. And one of the questions he asked was, Mal Islam? What is Islam? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave these 5 foundational beliefs as the answer. Now let us take each of these foundational beliefs one at a time. Each of these is unique in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the opportunity to worship Him in different ways. So when we look at Iman, having faith, testifying, doing the Shahada, this stays with a person continuously 24 hours a day. So a person who has faith is perpetually in Islam, whether they are awake or asleep. Then we have our Salah. Salah is something a person does daily. So the frequency is 5 times a day, and it can be called a physical form of ibadah, a fa'ili ibadah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us for using our bodies to perform particular physical commands. Then after, we have the fasting in the month of Ramadan. Now the frequency of fasting is 1 month each year. A Muslim adult on average will spend approximately 1/12 of their life fasting. And this is a type of ibadah which is abstention, a taraki ibadah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now rewarding us for not doing something. So very soon, in a couple of days' time, we'll be rewarded for not eating or drinking or having relations with our husbands or wives during the daylight hours. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now rewarding us for not doing something. Then we have zakat. Zakat, the obligatory alms or charity. And this is a financial form of ibadah, or you could say a mali ibadah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is now giving us the opportunity to spend the money that we have and give it to a valid recipient, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards this for the spending. Now, one thing I just want to add here is if we have this mindset that everything we have is not ours, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever money we are taking, which is with us, and giving it to a valid recipient, is actually belongs to this recipient. It's not ours. So if we can disattach or take away our relationship with our wealth, it becomes very easy for us to discharge our zakah. And then finally, we have the Hajj, the pilgrimage. Now the frequency of zakah is once a year, and the frequency of Hajj is once in a lifetime. So the first Hajj a person does is the only act of worship which is farad only once. Any subsequent Hajjs will be nafil. And the Hajj comprises of all the different types of ibadah. So it is very, very physical. We do the tawaf, we do the sa'i, etc. It is abstention as well, because when we're in ihram, there are certain prohibitions upon us as well. It is financial as well, as those people can see who are going for Hajj this year. It's very, very expensive. So this type of ibadah encompasses all the different types of ibadah. So you can see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite wisdom and mercy, gives us a variety of different ways to worship Him and earn lots of reward. Also, it is an obligation upon each and every Muslim to learn how to discharge our zakah. Our Rasulullah mentions in one hadith, Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim, that the seeking or searching of knowledge is obligatory upon every single Muslim. So this leads me on to the second question, inshallah. So if you can again answer in the chat, don't feel shy, inshallah. Even if you don't know exactly, but you want to take a guess, then please feel free and take a guess. So what is the meaning of the word zakah? So this could be in 2 different points. This is as a literal point of view, or also from a shari'i point of view. So let's see what sort of answers we get. So we've got one answer, which is to purify. Okay, anything else? Don't feel shy. To give charity, okay. Anything else? Okay, so we've got a couple of answers, inshallah. Okay, let's have a look. To increase, okay, good. So, and to seek mercy, okay. Excellent. We've got a few answers, inshallah. Let's have a look then. So, the literal meaning of the word zakah. The first is purity. So, mashallah, well done to Zainab, she got it right. So, purity, tahara. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-A'la, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى, that success is surely achieved by him who purifies himself. Now, the reason why zakah has been called zakah is because it purifies the person who discharges it from the baseness of sin and miserliness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah At-Tawbah, خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. Take sadaqah, the obligatory alms, out of their wealth through which you may cleanse and purify them. So this is the first meaning. Another meaning is increase, numur. Now the reason why it is called increase is because zakah is a means for a person's wealth to grow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a return to the person who discharges their zakah in this world and also gives them the reward in the hereafter as well. Another meaning is truthfulness. I don't think anybody got this one. Now, why is it called truthfulness? Now, the reason is when a person discharges zakah, it shows their truthfulness in their faith and the state of their heart. Each and every person here today on this workshop, nobody knows what another person's financial situation is. Only we know. So when we discharge our zakah, we know whether we are being truthful or not, or whether we've cut corners, etc. So if a person discharges it correctly, this is truthfulness, and truthfulness and purity are a mark of a person's sincere intention, their ikhlas. Now, when a person gives zakah, this becomes a form of purifying their wealth. So any impurities in our wealth are removed when we give zakah. And once our wealth becomes purified, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now gives us barakah, blessings in our wealth, and this now in turn causes it to increase. So subhanAllah, so a person will give their zakah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them barakah, blessings in their wealth. Now one thing, brothers and sisters, we have to remember is it's not about the amount of money we have, but the amount of barakah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in our money. We could have a person who has lots of money, they spend, for example, £150 a week on shopping, and even before the week is over, the food has run out. On the other hand, a person goes and spends only £50 a week, and after a week, they open their cupboards and there's still food left over. So you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in a person's wealth. So even on a little money, a person can live very, very comfortably. So let's move on to the Shari'i meaning of zakah, the Islamic meaning. It is the transfer of ownership of a certain amount of wealth that has been prescribed by law from a rich Muslim to a poor Muslim who is not a Hashimi and neither a slave of a Hashimi for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does this mean? A person who is classified in Islam as eligible to give zakat, so they are a zakat giver, must transfer ownership of wealth to a person who is classified in Islam as being eligible to receive zakah. This person who receives the zakah cannot be from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or be a freed slave from his family. More details on this later on. The recipient must also be a Muslim and must then be able to do with the wealth whatever he or she wishes. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, I'm a landlord. I've calculated my zakah for this year to be £6,000, and I have a tenant in one of the houses that I have. Now, the rent this tenant pays me each month is £500. So £500 times 12 is £6,000. So what I say to him is, my zakat is £6,000. Because you're poor and you're eligible to receive zakat, you don't need to pay me rent for the next year. So that way, that £6,000 would equate to the amount of rent that they owe us. Now, in this scenario, the zakah of the landlord will not be discharged because there has been no transfer of ownership. So this criteria of transferring the ownership has not been met. If myself or whoever was a landlord actually gave the money, upfront, £6,000, and then they decided to give £500 in rent, then that would have been discharged. But you can see how the transfer of ownership is very, very important and one of the conditions of zakah, sorry. Okay, now let's quickly move on to the next module, which is the hadith concerning zakah. As mentioned earlier, the books of hadith are full of narrations talking about all aspects of zakah. And we have already seen how zakah can benefit a person in this world, but how else will they be rewarded? Now, because of time constraints, inshallah, I'm just going to go through the translation of these hadith. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if one gives in charity what equals one date fruit from honestly earned money, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only accepts honestly earned money, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes it in his right and enlarges its reward for that person who has given it, as any one of you brings up his baby horse. So much so that it becomes as big as a mountain, subhanAllah. So if a person gives just one date from honestly earned money, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us as big as a mountain. Now imagine how many dates can be purchased by the amount of zakat that we give. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the reward of even a little charity. Now on the other hand, what is the warning for a person who doesn't discharge their zakah properly? Again, we look in Sahih al-Bukhari. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever is made wealthy by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and does not pay the zakat of his wealth, then on the day of resurrection, his wealth will be made like a bald-headed, poisonous male snake with 2 black spots over their eyes. And the snake will encircle his neck and bite his cheeks and say, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited verse 180 from Surah Al Imran, the translation of which is, those who withhold in miserliness what Allah has given them out of His grace should not take it as good for them. Instead, it is bad for them. They shall be forced on the doomsday to put on what they withheld as iron collars round their necks. To Allah belongs the inheritance of the heavens and the earth. Allah is all aware of what you do. So we can see the reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, but also the severe punishment for those people who do not discharge their zakah properly. Okay, now let's move on to the next module, inshallah. We're going to start learning about the theory with regards to zakah now. So we're going to start off with a quick question, which I want you to answer in the chat window, please. So upon whom is zakah obligatory? So what are the conditions a person must meet for them to have to pay zakah? So I'll give you a minute to write the answers in the chat, inshallah. And then we'll see if the answers are correct. Like I mentioned, even if you're guessing, then just guess, just put the answers in, inshallah. Okay, a sane adult. Okay, good. Anything else? Have to be balig. Okay, good. Sane adults again. A person who has nisab amount for 1 lunar year. Very good. An adult sane person who owns nisab. Good, excellent. So I think we've got most of the answers here. Let's take a look. So what are the conditions? Number 1, the person has to be a Muslim, be free. Yeah, so they can't be a slave. Non-Muslims do not have to pay zakat. Remember, we are talking about who has to give zakat. Number 2, the person must be baligh, classified as an adult in Islam, so past the age of puberty. Number 3, they must be sane, of sound mind. And number 4, they must be sahib nisab, from productive wealth. Now, this term sahib nisab, I'm going to be using throughout this workshop. Also, I'm going to call it a nisab holder. So the sahib nisab means he or she must own a minimum amount of wealth, which is known as the nisab, in that type of wealth which is productive. Now, this is also known as the quantum amount. This will be discussed in more detail later on. And like I mentioned, I will also use the term nisab holder, which means the same thing. Another condition is the person must have been sahib nisab, a nisab holder, for the duration of 1 Islamic year, which is a lunar year. So if a person decides to, for example, pay their zakat on the 1st of January every year, that will not satisfy the criteria of paying their zakat every lunar year. So it must be an Islamic date, which we'll talk about more later on. Also, something we have to remember here is if a child has some wealth and they are sahib nisab, this could be cash or money in a bank account or even jewelry, then the date the child becomes baligh will be the start of their zakat anniversary. And I'm going to talk about the zakat anniversary more later on. So what I would really recommend parents, if our children have got money which is allocated to themselves and the day they become an adult according to Islam, we need to note down the Islamic date. Now, this ruling would also apply to a person, for example, who reverts to Islam. If a person embraces Islam and he or she is a nisab holder on the day they reverted, that day would also be their zakat anniversary as well. So there are two things we now need to explain. Number one, what is the nisab value? And secondly, what do we mean by productive wealth? So let's look at the nisab value first. The nisab value or quantum is owning wealth which is equivalent or above a certain amount of gold or silver. Now, the gold nisab is based upon 20 mithqal, which was a weight used in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In today's time, 1 mithqal weighs 4.374 grams, so 20 mithqal would be 87.4 grams. This is the gold nisab. Now, let's look at the silver nisab. The value of silver is based on 200 dirhams. Again, a dirham used to have a weight which was 3.0618 grams. So 200 dirhams would be approximately 612 grams. So what is the nisab value today? Now, I'm going to talk about the zakat anniversary later on, but I just want to mention a little bit here. So on the day that we need to discharge our zakat anniversary, we will check the nisab value at that particular day. If we are equal to or above the nisab, then we will have to discharge our zakat. So it's important to calculate it on this day. Now, I checked the prices just recently, actually, and let's see what it is. So on the 26th of February, the silver nisab was £350 and 35 pence, and the gold nisab was £4,531 and 46 pence. Now, how do we know which nisab value to use? Should we use the gold or should we use the silver? If a person owns mixed assets, for example, they have gold, they have silver, they have cash, they have shares, etc., they will use the silver value as the minimum threshold. So if this person has £350 and 35 pence or more, they will be sahib nisab. Now, if for some reason a person only has gold, so they have no other assets, they've got no gold, silver, they've got no pension or shares or any cash, they will then use the gold nisab. Yes, so they will only use the gold nisab if they only have gold. And the above figure is based on 24 carats. So I would say 99% of the people will be using the mixed assets, hence, or they will use the silver value because they will have mixed assets. So, like I mentioned earlier, on the day we are going to discharge our zakat anniversary, we're going to calculate the nisab value that day. Also, if a person has gold or silver, they will be able to use these prices per grams to value their gold and silver as well. Okay, now let's move on. So we need to calculate the nisab value on the day we discharge it. One of the sites I use is wellwishes.org.uk. If you go onto that website, alhamdulillah, it's got some really good tools where you can go in and you can calculate the value of gold, silver. You can even type in choose what carat the gold is. You can also backdate it as well. So that's a really, really good website if you need to go. Inshallah, I will be supplying you with all the slides and lots of links after this as well. So there's no need to take any screenshots or anything at this moment in time. Okay, so let's move on. What do we need to pay zakat on? All types of productive wealth. So it will be paid on all money, cash in the bank, in the wallet, in the house, whether it's hidden in our mattresses, in our pillows, etc. Also foreign currencies as well. So many people go on holiday. For example, if you just come back from Umrah and you brought back some riyals and they're still in your wallet, you need to pay it on all types of foreign currency as well. It will also be paid on gold, silver, merchandise for businesses. We're going to cover this later on. Crops, cattle, pension funds, which we contribute to. Again, we're going to cover this in more detail later on. Shares, again, covered in detail later. Any committees that we are involved in which we pay money into. If anyone also has cryptocurrency, then this must be valued according to the currency you use and also included as a zakatable asset. Now, the value of our productive wealth must be added together to make our total gross amount. So you would call this the zakat gross value, but this isn't what we pay zakat on. Yeah, we will pay on the net value, which I'll explain later on. For this presentation, I'm not going to go into detail on zakat on animals or crops, which includes fruits, dates, etc. If anyone has any livestock or orchards, then please speak to a scholar and get the information on what you need to pay on, etc. Okay, now, what don't we have to pay zakat on? So any type of wealth which is non-productive. So this could be any assets that the person owns. For example, the house that we live in, or the car that we use for work or recreation, or the furniture that we have in the house. This would include all types of electrical items, pots and pans as well. Also, any jewelry which is not gold or silver. So if a person has a diamond, for example, now this isn't for selling. A person has just got it because it's been given to them as a present or they purchased it to wear, etc. Then there will be no zakat on that as well. Also, any tools that a person has in their house, there will be no zakat on these. So like I mentioned, any jewelry which is not gold or silver will not be zakatable. Also, zakat is not payable on any land which a person may own. The value of the type of wealth is not taken into consideration for zakat as it is not productive. Now, I've got a little section here with regards to businesses. Now, again, businesses can be quite complicated when working out, especially the stock a person has in their shop. So what I would really recommend to everybody who has a business is have a really effective stock taking system. So at any moment in time, they can work out what the actual value of all the stock in their business is. Now, there's many different types of businesses, but each of them will have some fundamental rules which they can use to calculate how much zakah they need to pay. The business could be a manufacturing business, or it could be a retail business, or even both. So what do they have to pay zakat on? So any money they have in their business accounts, if they have any finished items, then the value at which they wish to sell these finished items, so it could be either retail or wholesale, or if it's both, then it would be the percentage of both. So let's say, for example, I've got a factory where I manufacture shirts and then I sell them. So the price I'm going to sell those shirts, not how much it's cost me to make them, but the price I'm going to sell them, whether it's retail or wholesale, is what I will use as the value of that shirt when calculating my zakatable assets for my business. Also, if I've got any unused material, then it will be the cost price. So when I make my shirts, I need lots of cloth, for example, thread. Because I haven't made the shirt yet, the cost of the cloth or the thread will be what I'll be calculating to use as the value of the asset for my business. So this is, in a nutshell, the things that you have to pay zakat on when you have a business. Now, what don't you have to pay zakat on when you have a business? So any buildings that you have, which might be factories, shops, offices, etc. Any fixtures or fittings. So in my little shirt factory, I've got a little shop at the front where I've got lots of shelves and hangers and everything where I display all my nice shirts. Again, there is no zakat on that. Any machinery that I use, all the cutting machines, sewing machines, there will be no zakat on that. And also the delivery vans, which are used for the business to go and deliver the shirts everywhere. Again, there will be no zakat on that neither. Now, I'm going to go through a quick example here, inshallah, which will take all this information and give us a really easy way to understand this. Let's say a person has a cake manufacturing business. They have some machinery which they use. Yeah, this includes a mixer, some scales, an oven, some cutlery used to mix the cake mixture, etc. There will be no zakat on these items. Now, they also have some of the items which they use to actually make the cake. So they've got milk, they've got some flour, they've got some sugar, and they've got some butter as well. Now, what they will do is if they haven't used these items yet, then they will calculate the cost value of these items when calculating how much zakat that they need to pay. Now, finally, once they put all the ingredients together and they've made a nice cake, then they will have to pay zakat on the retail value of the cake itself. So however much they sell it for, this is what they will have to pay zakat on. Now, again, this example, alhamdulillah, Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangira had used this example, and I liked it so much because it's quite easy to understand. I actually asked him if I could use it for the purpose of our workshop. So again, it's a very, very simple explanation to show us what do we have to pay on, what don't we have to pay on, and if we do have to pay on, whether it will be cost value or retail value. Another thing, like I mentioned earlier on, what we're going to do, inshallah, I'll answer any questions at the end. Now, another thing I was going to mention here as well, many people have businesses in their homes as well. So some people make cakes at home, some people make food at home, etc. So this also counts as a business, and you're going to have to, any money made in that, you're going to have to calculate for zakat as well. Okay, now let's quickly move on. So what information do we require before to actually calculating our zakat? So first of all, we need to work out how much zakat do we need to pay? What percentage of our total wealth? We then need to find out when do we have to pay zakat and how often do we need to pay? Now, once we've calculated our gross wealth, are there any deductibles which can be taken away from it to calculate our net wealth? And what happens if I have a debt or I have loaned a sum of money to someone else? Do I need to pay zakat on that as well? Now, let's move on to question number 4. It's a quick, easy question, inshallah. What percentage of our net wealth must we give in zakah? If you can put the answer inside the chat, please. Okay, so we've got an answer, 2.5%, 2.5. Any others? 2.5. Alhamdulillah. So that was quite an easy question, inshallah. Good. Excellent. Let's have a look. So, how much zakat do we have to pay? Once a person has worked out their net assets, they will pay 2.5% of the total, or 1/40th. We will talk about the net assets later on. Now, another quick question. How often must we pay zakat? Again, if you put the answers in the chat window, please. Be specific with regards to the answer. I've given the answer already, actually. Once a year, what type of year? Excellent. Every Islamic year, lunar year. Good, very good. Okay, good, good stuff. Let's move on. Okay, so let's have a look. How often do we have to pay? Zakat has to be paid once every Islamic year, so each lunar year. When do we have to start paying zakat? Now, this is quite challenging, actually, because ideally a person should make a note of the Islamic date they first became Nisab, or owners of the Nisab value, meaning a Nisab holder. So let's say a person had no zakatable assets, and then they started their first job. So they went to university, came out of university, they worked for a month, and now they got paid. And now whatever they got paid was above that Nisab value. Yeah. So that date that they got paid, they should make a note of the Islamic date. That will now be their zakat anniversary. So once we've got that date, one Islamic year later, if you are still equal or above the Nisab threshold and you have not reached or gone below 0 during the year, you will have to pay 2.5% of your total net assets on your day. So on that day each year, you will now discharge your zakat. It is also very important that we teach our children about this as well, because many people have savings or savings accounts for their children, and as soon as they become mature baligh, if the value is equal above the Nisab threshold, this will be their zakat anniversary, as I mentioned earlier on. Also, 1 year later, if they are still a Nisab holder, zakat will be due. Now, working out the zakat anniversary, let's talk a little bit more about this. Now, it may well be the case that a person cannot remember the Islamic date they became a Nisab holder and are not familiar with the Islamic calendar in general. Now, we must familiarize ourselves with our Islamic calendar and try and work out as best we can when we became a Nisab holder. We have access to online bank statements now as well, online banking. This should help us to work it out. There are also many date converters available, which can help us convert a date from the Gregorian format into the Hijri format so we can get the Islamic date. And this date must be a single date in the Islamic calendar and not a month. Now, many people have Ramadan as their zakat anniversary because it is easier to remember its month. Now, if a person has a zakat anniversary later on the year, but they want to pay zakat in the month of Ramadan, they can do so. However, on their actual zakat anniversary, they must make the calculation again, and if they are in arrears, they must pay the difference. So, for example, if my zakat anniversary is on the 1st of Dhul Hijjah, but I want to pay some in Ramadan, I can pay in Ramadan, but on the 1st of Dhul Hijjah, I will calculate how much zakat I need to pay, and if I've paid less, I will make up the arrears. Now, if a person's zakat anniversary is before Ramadan, then do not delay payment until Ramadan, as the obligation will remain outstanding. So if something happens to you and you pass away, for example, before you've actually paid the zakat that was due on you, this will be an obligation which has been left unfulfilled. So zakat should be discharged on our zakat anniversary, and we need to make every attempt to try and find out exactly when our zakat anniversary was. Now, there are a few scenarios that I'm going to go through now here, which talk about the Nisab value. So there's three scenarios. Let's say, for example, within any year, a person's total wealth drops below the Nisab threshold. According to the Hanafi school of thought, what is the ruling? Now, a person's wealth doesn't remain static. It goes up, it goes down. When we get paid, it goes up. When we have any expenditure, bills, or we need to pay something, it goes down. So our wealth is going to fluctuate. Now, a common misconception is people think I need to pay zakat on that wealth which I've held for a year. But how are you supposed to work out what part of your wealth you've actually had? So if you bought something, or you've had cash for this amount of time, or gold for this amount of time, it's not calculated like that. It will be calculated only on your zakat anniversary, and everything you have on your zakat anniversary, zakat will be paid on that. Now, if you can see this chart in front of you, so I've used this Nisab value here as £250 as a baseline. So we can see the 1st of Muharram, which is this person's zakat anniversary, they had £300 in their account. Now, 1 year later, if we look on the 1st of Muharram on the other side, we can see that they now have £900. So they have all year, they've remained above zero. So they did go down to just below £100, but they didn't go down to zero. So 1 year later, on the 1st of Muharram, they will pay zakat on the total amount of assets that they own here, the net asset value, which is £900. Now, one thing we have to remember from this scenario is that the savings remain positive all year. Okay, now let's move on to the second scenario. Now, in this scenario, again, we've got the 1st of Muharram as the zakat anniversary. We've got the Nisab value just below £250. Now, what happened here is in the month of Jumad al-Thani, the person's wealth actually dropped below zero, right? So not only did they not have Nisab, they also dropped below zero. And then what happened was, in the middle of the month of Rajab, on the 15th of Rajab to be exact, this person has now hit the Nisab value again. So what happens in this case is this person will no longer pay zakat on the 1st of anniversary, 1st of Muharram, but their zakat anniversary will change and become the 15th of Rajab, because once a person goes below zero, their zakat anniversary resets, and once they become a Nisab holder again, so 1 year later on the 15th of Rajab, they will now pay their zakat. Okay, now let's move on to the other scenario, the third one. Now, what happens if wealth reaches below Nisab on the zakat anniversary itself? Now, this is quite a busy graph, but I'm going to explain it because if some people are watching it on their phone, it might be a bit hard to determine exactly what's going on. So again, the person's zakat anniversary is on the 1st of Muharram, and they had £400. Yeah, then 1 year later, on the 1st of Muharram, they only had £200. So they haven't got the Nisab value, therefore they will not pay zakat on the 1st of Muharram. However, their wealth has not dropped below zero. So what happens in this scenario? What will happen is they will then go forward and see when they actually go above Nisab. So now on the 1st of Rabiul Awwal, they have gone above the Nisab. They now need to track back 12 months and see whether they were a Nisab holder 12 months before the month of Rabiul Awwal. So if we look there, they had £600 in their account. So now they satisfied the criteria of having wealth above Nisab for 12 months and not going over, not going below zero. Hence, they will pay zakat on the 1st of Rabiul Awwal. So inshallah, I hope these scenarios actually make some sense. Let's have a look. So from then on, their zakat anniversary will change and will be the 1st of Rabiul Awwal. Now, quickly moving on, deductible. So we've talked about all the things that we have to pay zakat on, but are there any things that we can take away from our gross asset or gross zakat value to bring our net asset value, which is what we need to pay zakat on? Let's have a look at this. So what can we use as deductibles, or what can we use as deductibles? First of all, any bills which are currently outstanding. For example, if we've got some utility bills, gas or electricity bill that we need to pay, it's outstanding council tax bill that can be taken off our gross asset value. Any immediately payable but known, so for example, let's say I borrowed £2,000 off my father and he says he wants it back straight away, then I can actually take that off my gross zakat value as well. And then any deferred loans with arranged payment plans, payments due in the coming Islamic year. We're going to talk about this in a bit more detail later on as well, but what do I mean here? Let's say, for example, a person has a halal mortgage and each month they repay a certain amount for the forthcoming lunar year. So whatever payments they make for the forthcoming lunar year can also be deducted from the total gross asset value that we have. Also, any outstanding debts on goods purchased. So I went and bought myself a bed. I haven't paid him yet and he wants the money straight away. So I can take that value off as well. Also, any salaries due to be paid that month. So if I'm a business owner and I've got someone working for me, I need to pay them £2,000, for example, I can also take that off my gross asset value. Also, if there is a case, or in the unlikely case, where a person has got married and still has not paid their mahar. So after being married for 20 years, the husband has a change of heart and thinks, I better pay my wife her mahar. And if I'm going to be paying it that month, they can also take the amount of mahar as a deductible as well. Now, just to clarify one point again, the zakat will be paid on our net asset value. And the way we get to our net asset value is we have our gross asset value where we add all our assets together. Then we add all our deductibles. We subtract our deductibles from our gross asset value, which gives us our zakat liability, which is the net asset value. Now, inshallah, we will go through this in a scenario, but this is just to make you aware of what we need to pay on and what we can take off as deductibles. Now let's talk a little bit about debts to be paid, debt liabilities. I briefly touched upon this subject in the previous slide. Now, could be cases where a person has borrowed money. So this could be a personal loan from someone, or it could be a loan to buy a car or a halal mortgage to buy a house, etc. The loan's going to be one of two types. The first one is an immediate short-term loan. This is where the loan must be paid back as soon as possible. If the loan is immediately payable, then this will be a deductible and the total amount can be taken away from our gross asset value. Now, if it's a deferred long-term loan, this is when the loan is not immediately payable. An arrangement has been paid or made with the lender where the payment has been deferred or a payment plan has been put in place, as is the case when a person has got a halal mortgage. So if the loan is deferred and the payment plan is in place, then the payments for the following 12 lunar months, one Islamic year, can be used as a deductible. So again, let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, I have an Islamic mortgage, halal mortgage, and each month I pay £500. So £500 times 12 payments. Now, your payments in the forthcoming Islamic year could be 11 or 12. Let's say it was 12 payments, then 12 payments times £500 is £6,000. So I can take that figure of £6,000 off my gross zakat liability. If a person has a conventional interest-bearing mortgage, then the repayment will consist of two parts. You'll have one which is repayment and one which is interest. Now, one thing we have to remember in Islam, interest is haram, whether we pay it or whether we take it. So in this case, if a person calculates their repayment over the forthcoming Islamic year, they cannot include the interest portion. So if a person pays £500, for example, and £100 was interest and £400 was repayment, they can only use that £400 figure each month for the following 12 months and deduct that. They are not allowed to deduct that interest portion. Okay, now, nowadays, many people borrow other people money as well. Now, one thing we have to remember as Muslims, we do not give or take interest, so we cannot charge interest on any money that we have given to anybody else. Now, a couple of the terms I want to use here. First of all, we have a lender. So the lender is the person who has given money, and the debtor is the person who has borrowed the money. And the money that they are waiting to receive can be of two types. For example, you could have a weak debt receivable or a strong debt receivable. What's the definition of a weak debt receivable? A weak debt receivable is when a person is waiting to receive one of the following types of payments. So, for example, I haven't got paid this month, I'm waiting for my wages. If I'm a landlord, I'm still waiting for some rental income off my property. If you're a woman and you haven't been paid her mahar yet, or if you're waiting for any inheritance or bequest to be paid. So we're waiting for this money to come into our account. It hasn't come into our possession yet. So what is the ruling? Do we add this to the value of our assets or don't we? Let's have a look. So the ruling for a weak debt receivable is you will not add this money to your assets. So zakat will not be payable on it unless you receive the money. Also, there will be no backdated zakat on these payments. So if it took years for you to receive this money, then all those years you didn't get it, there will be no backdated zakat. Also, I'll give you the example here. If you're a woman and your husband hasn't paid your mahar for 10 years and then he paid it, you will not have to pay backdated zakat for this. So this is the ruling for a weak debt receivable. Now let's look at a strong debt receivable. So now there's two types here. First of all, there's a good debt and there's a bad debt. The definition of a good debt is when the debtor, the person who has borrowed the money, acknowledges the debt and you are confident that you will receive the money. So let's say, for example, I borrowed some money to my sister because she wanted to buy a house and she acknowledges that I have given her the money and she's also good for her word. I've got a very, very good feeling that she will pay me back. So the ruling here will now be, we will add the value of that loan to our assets. Yeah, so if I borrowed her £5,000, I will add that £5,000 onto the value of my assets and pay zakat on it. So this is the definition of a good debt. Now, what about a bad debt? So a bad debt is where the debtor doesn't acknowledge the debt. They deny that you have given them money, and there is no realistic chance of getting the money back. So let's say again, I borrowed the money to my sister and I went to her house and I says, can I have my money back? And she says to me, what are you talking about? What money? You didn't give me any money. Now I'm thinking she's not acknowledging the debt. And next day she packs her bags and leaves. I don't even know where she is. So now there's no realistic chance of me getting the money back neither. So what is the ruling with regards to this as well? So now in this case, I will not add the value of that loan to my assets because I gave her £5,000. She doesn't admit that I've given her the money. I don't think that I'm going to get it back, so I'm not going to pay zakat on it. But let's say in a couple of years' time, she has a change of heart and she comes home and she says, look, I'm really, really sorry. I did borrow the money, but I was in a bit of a tight spot at the times. But now here, here's your money back. So now I've got this money after a few years. I do not need to pay any backdated money or any backdated zakat if I receive this money later on. Okay, now we've got a couple more sections now, inshallah, before we finish off the theory. Then once we finished off the theory, then inshallah we'll start doing some zakat calculations. Now, before I start this section, I just wanted to mention the excellent research done by Mufti Faraz Adam on this topic. He has prepared an excellent booklet called Zakat on Pensions, which I recommend anyone who has a pension reads. This will give them detailed information on how Zakat on pensions is calculated and the reasons why. In this section, I will briefly summarize how a person can first determine if they need to pay Zakat on their pensions, and if so, how to calculate it. So let's begin. What is a pension? A pension is a saving scheme which will help a person save money which they can receive when they reach retirement. Everyone who invests is encouraged to ensure they invest in a pension fund which is compatible with Sharia. And you can also find Sharia compliant products on the market nowadays. The type of fund they invest in may have zakatable assets which make a proportion of the value. and zakat only needs to be paid on the percentage of the net value of the company's zakatable assets. Now, what are the different types of pensions? There are basically three different types of pensions. Number one, the state pension. This is paid by the government when a person reaches the state pension age. There is no zakat on this pension. Secondly, you might have a workplace pension. So the employer arranges a scheme where each month the employer pays a contribution, and the employee will also pay a contribution at source. And there are two types. The first one is a defined benefit. This is also known as a final salary pension. The amount a person receives depends on the salary they were earning when they retired and how long they worked for that employer. There is no zakat on this type of pension. So on final salary pensions, there will be no zakat. Then we move on to a defined contribution. So the money that is paid into this fund is invested by the provider. When a person retires, the amount they receive depends on how much they have paid in and how well the investments have done. There is zakat payable on these types of pensions. And finally, you have an individual pension. This is a personal pension or a SIP, a self-invested pension or a stakeholder pension. So a person has a choice how often they pay into it, how much they pay into it, and the return depends on how much you put in and how well the investments have done. There is also zakat on this type of pension. So the first thing we need to do is when we have a pension, we need to work out what type of pension it is. You can speak to your HR department or your pension provider and ask them. It's not going to be a state pension, it's going to be either a workplace pension or an individual pension, and then you can decide whether or work out whether zakat is payable or not. So how am I going to work out the value of zakat I need to pay on my pension? Let's have a look. The first step is, can we check the fact sheet for the fund? This can be obtained by our provider. So what we need to do, like I mentioned before, the company or the fund that we've invested in, we might not have to pay zakat on the whole thing. We only need to pay zakat on the zakatable assets. So by looking at the fund fact sheet, are we able to calculate what percentage of that company, also our investment, will be actually zakatable? So if we can do that, then that's brilliant. We calculate the zakatable assets. It might be 50%, 60%, 20%, and then we calculate and discharge our zakat. Now, let's say, for example, a person has difficulty in obtaining the fund fact sheet, or let's be honest, not many of us are very financially savvy. We look at it and it will just be like gibberish. We won't make any sense of it. So what do we do then? We can then determine, first of all, we need to determine the type of fund. We contact our HR department or pension provider. And then once we've determined what type of fund it is, we are going to use a proxy table to determine the zakatable assets proxy. Now, a proxy is an estimation to make matters easier for people and is supported in Islamic law. The proxy values were calculated by Mufti Faraz after months of research and analyzing the 20 most common pension funds. So we're going to determine the type of fund we have. We're going to speak to our provider and they're going to tell us that it is going to be one of these different types of funds. So it's either going to be a Sharia compliant fund or a direct property fund, an equity fund, a mixed asset fund, or a bond, gilt, or a fixed interest fund. So what we're going to do is, once we've worked out what type of fund it is, we're going to use this table and look at the percentage value and pay zakat on that percentage of our holding on our pension. So let's use this as an example. So let's say a person has a property fund. So we can see from a property fund, the zakatable assets proxy is 15%. The fund total value was £50,000. So we are not going to pay zakat on £50,000, but we are going to pay zakat on 15% of £50,000. So our zakat liability for our pension will be £7,500. 2.5% of that will be a total of £187.50. So like I mentioned, to summarize, we need to find out what type of pension it is first, whether zakat is needed or not. Then we need to find out what type of fund it is. Once we've determined the type of fund, we can use the proxy table to determine what value or what percentage of it we need to actually pay zakat on. Inshallah, we're going to be going through quite a comprehensive example later on. Okay, now the final part before we start the calculations is on shares. So when a person buy shares in a company, there'll be two reasons why these shares have been purchased. First of all, they could be purchased for resale, or they've been purchased to hold as an investment and to generate dividends. The ruling on zakat will depend on which of the above reasons the shares have been purchased. If they've been purchased for resale, then zakat will be due on the entire holding. So if a person buys and sells shares quite often, then whatever the total holding is, they will pay zakat on that. Also, if they have got any dividends which are generated from the actual shares as well, they will pay zakat on those dividends as well. So that's the ruling for purchase to resell. Now, again, if a person has now purchased the shares to hold as an investment, the zakat will be due on dividends and also the percentage of zakatable assets in the company. So this is very similar to when we were working out the actual pension, because it might be the case that whatever fund or whatever company that we've actually invested in, it's not going to be 100% zakatable. It's only going to be certain the productive part or the productive wealth or productive assets of that company or the business, which is going to be zakatable. There's also going to be creditors, there's going to be debts as well, which can be used as deductibles. So it could be quite complicated when working out the zakatable assets of a company. Now, each person should do their own research and ideally calculate the zakatable assets for the company that they have shares in. A person will not just buy shares in any company. Yeah, people who like to buy shares, they'll investigate it, analyze it, forecast if their investment is going to be profitable. So they are going to have some knowledge of the company's finances. But if calculating the zakatable assets for the company proves difficult, then a proxy value can be used. So in the same way we used a proxy value, then we can use a proxy value for pensions, we can use a proxy value for shares as well. Now, in the article, Zakah on share investments, determining a proxy for calculation, Mufti Faraz has recommended that a value of 25% is used as a proxy value. Other scholars like Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangira have mentioned a figure of 40%, which is more cautious. All shareholders are encouraged to do further research on this before they decide which value to use. So let's look at this example. We're going to use a proxy value of 25% for this example. Now, one thing before we go into the actual example is a person who has shares in the following types of funds cannot use this proxy value. Yeah. So if a person has shares in a PLC or a startup which only has cash assets, or a small company known to have only cash assets, they cannot use this proxy value. They will be paying zakat on the total value of whatever they have invested. Now, so example, let's say a person has shares worth £10,000 in company X. The proxy value is 25%. So the zakat liability will be 25% of £10,000, which is £2,500. Now remember, the term zakat liability means the amount of money you need to pay zakat on, not how much zakat you need to pay. So 2.5% of £2,500 is only £62.50. So this is how you would calculate zakat on shares. Okay, alhamdulillah, we've come to the end of the actual theory now. So now we're going to start doing our calculations. And alhamdulillah, we're on track to try and finish by 8 o'clock, inshallah. Okay, so what do we need to do, or how do we calculate our zakat? Let's move on. So the first thing is, the calculation has to be made on our zakat anniversary. And for this example, we're going to say the 1st of Ramadan is our zakat anniversary. We need to calculate our gross asset value. Yeah, so we need to calculate all of our assets, work out what type of assets we have and how much they are worth. So let's go back to our list. So there's money, there's gold, there's silver, there's investments, and there's business. So you could categorize generally everything under these 5 headers. So if we look at money, let's say a person, they check their bank accounts. Now, one thing we have to remember is it's not only going to be cash in our savings account, it's going to be cash in our current account as well. Yeah. So a person checks this and they've got £10,000. Then they check their wallet, they've got £100 in their wallet, they've got £1,000 cash at home, they've got £500 cash in foreign currencies. Like I mentioned earlier on, any foreign currencies we have On the day of our zakat anniversary, we will convert the value of that foreign currency into pounds and pay zakat on that. So if I've got some dollars or riyals or dirhams, depending on how much I've got, I will convert the value and pay zakat on the pounds or whichever currency you use in the country you are from. Also, if you have any foreign accounts, some people have accounts in India, Pakistan, or in Dubai, or wherever it is, you need to make sure you know how much money is in there as well. For this example, this person hasn't got any, and any joint accounts. Now, when I say joint account, let's say, for example, a person has got a joint account with their wife, and they are both 50% shareholders in the value of that bank account. So there's £10,000 in that account, then this person will pay £5,000. Now we have to remember is you will pay your zakah and your wife will pay her zakat, because each person is an entity on their own, that they have their own assets as well. So you will calculate your zakat separately and make sure it is discharged. So the total value of cash this person has is £16,600. Next, going on to gold, this person has 250 grams of gold. Again, with regards to gold, we need to know what type of carat it is. So it could be that a person has 22 carat, a person has 18 carat. We need to weigh how much 22 we have, how much 18 we have, because the price will be different for each. The other thing is we will use this price of scrap gold, because when a person purchases gold, normally it depends on the weight and also the design of the actual gold itself. There's a charge for that as well. But once a person purchases it and they want to sell it, it will only be the weight of the gold that they will get money on. So that's one thing, to make sure you know what carat it is and you calculate it accordingly. So for this example, let's say the price of gold per gram was £40. So the total gold value this person has is £10,000. One thing I want to just mention here, if a person has any necklaces or any jewelry which has stones embedded into it, so it might be diamonds or rubies or whatever, if you can calculate the weight of those stones and deduct it from the total weight of the necklace, then that would be better, because you don't need to actually pay zakat on the stones itself, like I mentioned earlier on. Also, with regards to gold, there are certain opinions where if it is less than 12 carats, the quality of the gold would be less than 50%, therefore there will be no zakat on that. So anything which is 12 carat or less. Now, we've calculated the value of gold. Let's move on to the value of silver. So this person has got 1,000 grams of silver. The price of silver per gram was 40 pence. So the total silver value is £400. Moving on to investments. So a person had some cash in a committee. Now, what do I mean by a committee? Now, in some communities, what they do is every month, a group of people get together and they all put in a certain amount. So let's say, for example, there's 10 people and every single person puts in £100. And each month, the total amount given by everybody is £1,000. So one of those 10 people will get that £1,000. So over the course of 10 months, each person will get a sum of £1,000. So this is like a little type of saving scheme. Now, if a person has put money in but hasn't received their money back yet, then whatever money they have put in, they will have to add that as an asset. So for this example, this person has put in £500. Now, their shares zakat liability. Again, they calculated all of their shares, they used their proxy value, etc., and they worked out that they needed to pay £1,000 in zakat on the shares. Then they check their pension. Again, their zakat liability was £10,000 on their pension. Also, money lent to others. So this person borrowed his sister £5,000. Again, this is a good debt. She's acknowledged the debt. He's got a good feeling that he's going to get it back. And finally, any other investment, zero. So the total investment value is £16,500. Now, going on to this person's very, very simple business, the retail value of the stock he has got in his shop is £20,000, and the money that he's got in his business account totals £10,000. So the total business asset value is going to be £30,000. Okay, so what do we need to do now? We need to take all of these values and add them together so we can get our gross asset value. Let's have a look. So 16,600 for our cash, the gold was £10,000, silver was £400, total investment was 16,500, total business asset value was 30,000, so our total gross asset value is £73,500. Now, we don't need to pay zakat on this yet, because what happened was we need to now look at our deductibles and see if there are any deductibles we can take away from this amount. Again, someone's asked a question, like I mentioned, inshallah, we'll take some questions at the end, inshallah. Okay, so let's look at our deductibles. Firstly, outstanding bills. So a person has got an outstanding utility bill for £500. Also, immediately payable loans. The person borrowed £2,000 off their father. They want it back straight away, so we can use that as a deductible. Deferred loan payments for the forthcoming Islamic year. So this person pays £500 repayment every month. He's calculated that he needs to make 12 payments in the forthcoming Islamic year, which totals £6,000. Outstanding debts on goods received. So we bought something, but we haven't paid for it yet. That's £1,000. I've got a business. I need to pay the person who works for me for £2,000 salary for that month. Outstanding business bills. I've got a bill for £2,000. Outstanding mahar, if there was any outstanding mahar, but in this case there isn't. And the total deductibles we have is £13,500. So what we need to now do is calculate our net asset value. So we've calculated the value of all our assets and we've calculated the value of our deductibles. So our gross asset value was 73,500. The total deductibles was 13,500. Our net asset value is going to be £60,000. So after everybody does their calculation, they're going to come to a net asset value. Now this net asset value could be anything. What do we need to do next? Let's have a look. So first of all, is the net asset value above Nisab? So on our zakat anniversary, we checked, first of all, have we got mixed assets or only gold? We're going to use the appropriate Nisab value, which is most probably going to be the silver value. So let's say it's £350 for argument's sake. If the person's net asset value is not above Nisab, they don't need to pay zakat. Now, let's say it is above zakat, or sorry, above Nisab, then they have to pay zakat. So they will make a calculation. First of all, they take the net asset value, which is £60,000. They will divide that by 40, which gives them 2.5%. The total amount of zakat they will pay for this example is £1,500. Okay, now I'm going to give everyone a little testing. I'm going to give you a good couple of minutes to work this one out, inshallah. So look at this example. Very, very simple. A person has got £1,000 cash in the bank, cash in the house, £10,000. They've got gold to the value of £20,000. They've borrowed £5,000 to the masjid. They've got a halal mortgage monthly payment of £500. They've borrowed £2,000 from a friend and a utility bill for £200. So the first question I want you to ask, or I want to ask you is, what is their zakat liability? Meaning, how much do they have to pay zakat on? And secondly, how much zakat do they have to pay? So you need to first of all work out if any of these is an asset or a deductible. Then you add your assets, you add your deductibles, you subtract your deductibles from your assets, and you will come up with your zakat liability. And then you can work out how much zakat you need to pay. So you can use your phones for this. You need a calculator as well. I'm going to give everybody a couple of minutes, inshallah. So if you want to put the answer in the chat, zakat liability will be how much you need to pay zakat on, and zakat paid is how much you need to pay. So let's see if anybody gets the right answer. Inshallah, I'm hoping from the example that we've done, everybody will be able to see exactly what the right answer is. So inshallah, if you can work it out and give everybody a couple of minutes. Okay. Anyone managed to work it out yet? Okay, we've got one answer for £900. Okay. Let's see. I'm not going to tell you whether you're right or wrong just yet. I'm just going to wait for a few more answers to come through. Then inshallah, we'll go through the calculation. £967.50. Okay. Wait for a couple more. £900. Okay. 925. Okay. I'll take one more, inshallah, then we'll go through the calculation and hopefully it will make sense. £900. Okay. Now, let's have a look at the calculation. So first thing we need to determine whether it is an asset or whether it is a deductible. Now, the whole point of working through an example is when you need to carry out your own calculation, you'll be able to understand how to calculate it properly. So first of all, cash in the bank is an asset. Yeah, £1,000. Cash in the house is also an asset. Cash or the gold value is also an asset, and money loaned to the masjid is also an asset. So our total asset value is £36,000. Now, the halal mortgage payment, this is where people make a lot of mistakes. The deductible is not £500 because you pay that every month. You're going to calculate how many payments you're going to make for the forthcoming Islamic year. So let's say 12 payments. Therefore, the actual deductible value is going to be £6,000 on the halal mortgage. The money borrowed from a friend, immediately payable loan, is also deductible. So that's £2,000. And a utility bill is also deductible. So that's £200. So our total deductibles will be £8,200. So our gross assets were 36,000, deductibles were 8,200. We're going to subtract the deductibles from the gross assets, which gives us a zakat liability of £27,800. Hence, our zakat payable will be £695. Congratulations to Yamin, who got the right answer. Now, I'm glad a few people didn't get it correctly because inshallah, they'll see from this example, I did put in a bit of a curveball with regards to the halal mortgage monthly payment, but inshallah, you'll be able to see how we can calculate our zakat as well. Okay, now let's quickly move on. So now we've worked out how to calculate our zakat, we need to know how to discharge it. So what are the conditions of zakat? We must discharge it as soon as possible on our zakat anniversary. So let's look at the intentions, let's look at the conditions. The first one is the intention. Now, Sahib Quduri mentions that it is not valid to offer zakat without an intention coinciding with the payment or coinciding with the setting aside of the obligatory portion, because zakat is an act of worship and one of its conditions is intention. So when we have calculated our wealth, we need to take out for zakat and we separate the amount from our assets, we should make an intention. We can also make the intention when we are paying the agent who will discharge the zakah on our behalf. For example, when we give it to a charity, yeah, the actual intention should be made at the same time as we are carrying out the act of worship. Like for example, when I'm praying salah, I make the intention just before I pray salah. But due to the fact when it comes to zakat, we may be giving zakat to multiple people, we can make the intention at the times before as mentioned. Again, this just needs to be in the heart. It doesn't need to be verbal. Now, the transfer of zakat. Before we go into the next session, this is very, very important. We need to just recap what the actual definition of this is. So the Shari'i meaning of zakah is the transfer of ownership of a certain amount of wealth that has been prescribed by the law from a rich Muslim to a poor Muslim who is not a Hashimi and neither a slave of a Hashimi, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the possession of the wealth must be transferred to the recipient and they must have complete control over it and what to do with it as well. So this leads me on to the next question, which inshallah you can put the answer in the chat. Who can we give zakat to? So if you want to put it into the chat, who can we give zakat to? Which type of person is allowed to receive zakah in Islam? Let's have a look. Anybody? Poor people, okay. Can I give zakat to my neighbor, for example, or my wife, or my kids, or someone walking down the street? Someone on whom zakat is not farz to give himself. Okay, let's have a look if there's anything else on that. So again, these questions just show us it's not as simple, it's not clear cut. You know, we need to learn about zakat to be able to discharge it properly. Anything else? To poor Muslims. Okay, good. All right, so let's have a look. This is a very interesting section actually. So it is very important that we only pay zakah to a person who is eligible to receive zakah in Islam. If we do not give it to the right person, then our zakah will not be discharged. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah At-Tawbah 8 groups of people to whom zakah can be given to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the sadaqat prescribed alms are meant only to be given to, first of all, the poor, fuqara. Then the masaqeen, the needy, وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, to those employed to collect them, وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم, to those whose hearts are to be won, وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, and in the cause of slaves, وَالْغَارِمِينَ, those who are encumbered with debt, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, in the way of Allah, and وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the wayfarer. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this is an obligation prescribed by Allah. Allah is all-knowing and all-wise. Now let's take each of these one at a time because we need to know what the definitions are. First of all, the fuqara. The poor, according to the Ahnaf, will be those people who have net assets less than the Nisab value. So remember we looked at the Nisab value. So the first thing is that this person hasn't got assets, or they have assets which are less than the Nisab value. More explanation later on because it's not just as simple as this. The next one, or the next section, or the next group is the masakin, the needy, and that according to the Ahnaf are those people who have no earnings at all. Then we have al-amilina alayha. Now this used to be the zakat collectors, the amils who went out to collect zakat on behalf of the Islamic governments of the time. Yeah, so nowadays there's not any actual Islamic governments, so there is no, how could you say, people who can be given this zakat. Then al-mu'allafati qulubuhum, the reconciliation of hearts. This were people who have just embraced or are inclined to embracing Islam. Now, like I mentioned earlier on, one of the references I've used for this workshop, Tuhftul Al-Ma'i by Mufti Sayyid Ahmad Palampur alayhi, mentions that there were 6 different types of al-mu'allafat al-qulub, 2 for non-Muslims and 4 for Muslims. Now, Umar radiallahu anhu, during his time as a Khalifa, suspended the share of mu'allafat al-qulub. He mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now given Islam victory, so there is no need to now make non-believers inclined towards Islam. They are actually needy of Islam themselves. And according to the Ahnaf and Imam Malik, all 6 categories of this type are suspended. Furthermore, there are no narrations which mention that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave money from zakah to mu'allafatul qulub. The narration which is mentioned by Imam Tirmidhi rahmatullahi alayhi refers to the wealth which was given from the 1/5 of the spoils of war. Next we have riqab, for those who are in bondage. So in the times before, at times of war, there would be captives. In order to free the captives, they could use this money. Then gharimin, those people who are in debt, meaning their liabilities are more than their zakatable and surplus assets. Then we have fi sabilillah, those people who strive in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally the wayfarers, those people who are travelers who have no access to their personal wealth, are in dire need. So for example, let's say I went for Hajj or Umrah, and when I got there I lost my wallet and I've got nothing at all. I'm in desperate need. Even though I've got money here, because I'm over there, I'm traveling and I'm in desperate need, then zakat can be given to a person who has a similar situation to that. Now we need to go one step further now. And before this, I just want to again recap the types of wealth that we have. So we have productive wealth, that wealth which has the potential to increase, like money, gold, silver, livestock, crops, etc., on which we can pay zakat. Then we have non-productive, which is all other types. Now, we're going to go into this section to look at exactly which type of people have to give zakat and which type of people can take zakat. It is very important to know these definitions, because what happens is sometimes we might give zakat to a person thinking that they are allowed to take it. Other times a person could be poor and think they can ask for zakat. But let's look at all the different rulings. So the first example here is the person does not possess nisab or productive wealth, but has non-productive wealth whose total value exceeds the value of silver nisab. So this person, they don't have productive wealth, which is a Nisab value, let's say £350, but they've got non-productive wealth or excess non-productive wealth whose total value exceeds the value of silver Nisab. So what is a ruling for this? First of all, no matter how much non-productive wealth this person has, they will never pay zakat because they are not a Nisab holder. Now, moving on, Sadaqatul Fitr will be wajib upon them. The Udhiyah, Qurbani will be wajib. The expenditure of both maternal and paternal relatives who are Dhi Raham Mahram will be incumbent on this person. Hajj becomes farad upon them. If they have extra land or houses, then these should be sold to enable them to go for Hajj. And finally, zakat becomes haram upon them. So you can see, even though this person doesn't have productive wealth which equals nisab, because they've got non-productive wealth, which is excess, which exceeds the value of silver nisab, they are not allowed to take zakat. So this is very, very important, because many times we might give it to a person who we think is eligible for zakat, but they've got lots of extra stuff. For example, they've got a couple of cars, they've got extra clothes that they, more than they actually need, they've got an extra phone. So if all the value of these excess non-productive assets they have is equal or over the silver nisab, then they are not allowed to take zakat. Look at this section now. The person possesses nisab value in productive wealth. This is pretty simple because this person now is a nisab holder. So it's exactly the same as before. Sadaqatul Fitr will be wajib. They have to give udhiyah, the expenditure of both paternal and maternal relatives. Hajj becomes farad upon them. This person cannot take zakat, but furthermore, this person now must pay zakat each Islamic year. So we can see this is where most of us will fit into this category. Now, there's two more categories I want to discuss. The first one is a person does not possess nisab of either productive or non-productive wealth. Yeah, so they haven't got nisab productive, and even they haven't got anything excess non-productive wealth which equals a nisab value. But this person has enough to live for 24 hours. What is the ruling for this person? It is permissible to give this person zakat. It is permissible for this person to receive zakat. However, it is haram, impermissible for this person to ask for zakat. Now, you might get some people in some communities where people come and ask for zakat. Again, they need educating. If they have enough food or enough to live on for 24 hours, they are not allowed to ask. They might be eligible to receive zakat, but they should not ask for the zakat. And that leads me on to the last section here, or the last section in this part, where a person does not possess nisab of either productive or non-productive wealth and does not have enough to live for 24 hours, then we can give this person zakat. This person can receive zakat, and not only this, it is permissible for this person to actually ask for zakat as well. So if a person is this desperate that they haven't even got enough food to live for 24 hours, they can even ask for zakat. Okay, now moving on quickly to summarize this section. If a person is not sahib nisab, i.e. they are not the owner of net productive assets equaling the nisab value in today's money, and they also do not possess non-productive wealth equal to or exceeding the silver nisab value, then we are able to give them zakat. Now, who can't we give zakat to? So now we've worked out who we can, but what happens if a person is one of those categories? They might still not be eligible for zakat. So let's have a look. First of all, anyone who's from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the freed slaves of his family. So there are 5 families to whom zakah cannot be given. So they are the children of Abbas radiallahu anhu, the children of Harith ibn Abdul Muttalib radiallahu anhu, the children of Ali radiallahu anhu, the children of Ja'far radiallahu anhu, and the children of Aqil radiallahu anhu. If anybody is from their family, we cannot give them zakat. But what happens in the situation where a person is poor? What do we do then? Now, in that case, we can give them normal sadaqah. You can see there's actually organization in, I think it's Batli called Rabita. They do a fund called the Ahlul Bayt Fund, where you can actually donate to the people from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam using that as well. Okay, who else can't we give zakat to? A person cannot give zakat to certain relatives, their husband or wife, their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So I can't say on my zakat anniversary that, say to my wife, oh, here you go, this is my zakat for this year, and then the following year on her zakat anniversary, she gives it back to me. Yeah, this is not allowed. You can't give it to your husband or your wife. You can't give it to your parents, you can't give it to your children, but you can give it. So if you have any poor siblings, you can give them your zakat. Now, other parties which cannot receive zakat: masjids and madrasas, construction and maintenance. So if someone comes and they're raising money for a masjid, you cannot give them zakat because they do not satisfy any of the criteria which we've just been through. Any schools, any projects which are used by the public. For example, if someone is raising money to build a public water pump or a well, you cannot use zakat money because there will be no transfer of ownership to a particular person, which is one of the conditions of zakat. Also, zakat cannot be given to any non-Muslims neither. Now, what happens sometimes if there's a natural disaster, there's a natural disaster fund, and some people ask, can we give money to that? Can we give zakat money to that? I say, no, you're not allowed to give zakat money, but you can give normal sadaqah if you wish to. Okay, now moving on to the second last section, inshallah. We're nearly at the end, alhamdulillah, we're getting there slowly. Now, we're very lucky that nowadays there are many charities who collect money for zakah. Firstly, we must remember it is our responsibility to ensure that we discharge our zakah properly. We must vet the person or charity and ensure that they will pass it on correctly. Because we've seen today, zakat is not easy. You need to know all the rules, the fiqh behind it to be able to calculate it, to be able to discharge it, make sure it gets to the right person. So what are the advices? Number one, we have to ensure the charity we give it to has a 100% zakat donation policy. If we donate, for example, £1,000 and they use 10% for commission, then our £1,000 zakat hasn't gone. Only £900 has gone. Yeah, so we need to ensure whoever we're giving it to has a 100% zakat donation policy. Secondly, ensure that the charity has a board of ulama from your school of thought, scholars who know how and to whom the money can be distributed. So we need to ensure whichever charity we're giving it to, that they have people in the background to be able to calculate, to work out who the zakah needs to go to. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, there are some charities who have no qualified ulama who won't even know these conditions. So how do we know, even if we're giving them our zakah, how do we know if they're even discharging it properly? Yeah. So before donating, inquire about who determines how the funds are allocated, what criteria is used, etc. Also, do not take a risk with your zakah and give it to charities or people who have not been vetted or do not distribute it properly and raise funds in ways contrary to the teachings of Islam. If there's a charity who's raising money and they're doing it in such a way where it's against the Shari'i rulings of Islam, how much can we trust them to actually discharge our zakah properly afterwards? If they're not raising it properly, how do we know they're going to be able to discharge it? So make sure we don't take a risk with our zakat. If we're not sure about any charity, speak to your local scholars and inshallah they will be able to give you the relevant advice, because we have to remember we are personally responsible for our zakat. Yeah. Also, if you want to nowadays, if you use a UK-based charity, you can go to the Charity Commission website and have a look at their accounts as well to give you any more peace of mind who you are giving it to. Also, your charity contributions can also be used to offset for tax purposes, where you can really receive some tax relief. Now, again, you can speak to the tax office and say you give this much money a year in charity. Again, one thing I would recommend, if you give it to a UK-based charity, you have an audit trail of how much you've donated. So if they do ask you for proof of donations, you'll be able to easily give them proof of how much you've actually given in charity. Also, if you are a taxpayer and it is a UK charity, registered charity, make sure we select gift aid so they can use some of the tax relief themselves and they can use that for admin costs, etc. Also, if possible, find the people yourselves and give them our zakah personally, especially if they are relatives who satisfy the conditions given above. So if you have any relatives, whether they are in this country or whether there are people in another country, and we know that they are genuine recipients of zakat, then we should give them our zakat as well, especially if they are relatives, because we'll be fulfilling two rights: one of the actual zakat itself, and secondly, one of kinship, because they are related to us. Okay, alhamdulillah, coming up to the final part now to summarize everything that we've learned today. I appreciate we've gone through it very, very quickly. I apologize for that. It's because of the time constraints that we've had, but inshallah it's been beneficial, and we can always, this session will be recorded inshallah and uploaded, so you can have some more, you can go back to it and refer it to it later on. So to summarize, Alhamdulillah, Islam has solutions to all of society's problems. And here it addresses one of the biggest issues, and that is poverty. The aim is to not keep people poor, but empower them to get themselves out of poverty by giving them ownership of the wealth. They can then use this wealth to get themselves out of poverty, invest it, maybe use it to trade. Now, let's look at this country. In the UK, in 2023, there were 28.1 million households. So the average household savings was £12,500. So that totals £350,000 million, which were in just savings, yeah, of all the people. Now, if we just say, for example, 1%, now the population of Muslims in England is probably around 5%. But let's say, for argument's sake, not even 5%, or just 1% were Muslim zakat givers, yeah? How much zakat would they give? So just 1% would have a total amount of savings of £3,500 million. And if 2.5% was given each year, it would be 87,812,500 pounds each year just from the UK. So if we look at the whole world, there would actually be billions raised each year, and this would go a very, very long way to eradicating poverty. So you can see, alhamdulillah, there are many, many benefits, and one of the benefits of zakah and the wisdom behind zakah is to bring people out of poverty. So what benefits are there? It brings barakah to our wealth when we give zakah. It also brings people out of poverty, like I just mentioned. Imagine over 80 million pounds was spent on the poor Muslims, yeah, in this country. It'd go very, very far to eradicating poverty. Also, it eases social issues because there will be less burden on the actual government, etc., because the people are wealthy. Then we also have, it brings people closer together, especially if it's your family. It fulfills an obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is an act of ibadah which will be rewarded immensely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to those people who discharge it properly. Now, if anyone has any questions regarding their personal situation, then please consult your scholars who may be able to help. So to conclude, inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to discharge our zakah properly. May He eradicate poverty all over the world and bless us in this holy month of Ramadan, which we are soon to enter. Once again, Jazakallah khair to everybody for attending, and let us all make the intention of putting into practice what we have learned today. On the final slide, I'm going to leave this open for the time being. If anyone wants to join our personal Islamic Academy Coventry WhatsApp broadcast group, then inshallah you can just scan this QR code and add yourselves in. What I'm going to be doing now is, inshallah, I'm going to be looking at the questions and directly replying to yourselves, whoever has asked, inshallah. And if anybody else hasn't got any questions, they are free to leave. Whoever has asked questions, if you can just bear with me while I try and go through the questions as best I can. So I'll stay on for the next 10 minutes or so. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.